Hey there, silly geese quackers. Welcome back. This is the Catching Fire is a Great Film Adaptation Series Part 10. What we've seen over the course of the past 20-some videos is that frequently the film adjusted the story to appeal to the interests and needs of the 2010s audience, at least the original trilogy's 2010 audience, which makes perfect sense. But it did mean that we had to shift how we're looking at the adaptations. So now we're looking at how changes were made between the books and the movies and how that affects the commentary the story provides. This time we're going to close out Catching Fire, which means we're going to be looking at what happens after Katniss was rescued. Spoiler alert, this video may reference any part of the series. Yes, that includes Sunrise on the Reaping. The rescue is set up pretty differently right away. In the film, when we see her pulled out of the arena, she's unconscious and she wakes up in the hospital. So let's start with how Katniss experiences her rescue in the book. The hovercraft materializes above me without warning. The claw drops from the underside until it's directly overhead. The metal talons slide under me. I want to scream, run, smash my way out of it, but I'm frozen. Helpless to do anything, but fervently hope I'll die before I reach the shadowy figures awaiting me above. They have not spared my life to crown me victor, but to make my death as slow and public as possible. My worst fears are confirmed when the face that greets me inside the hovercraft belongs to Plutarch Heavensbee, head game maker. His hand reaches for me, I think to strike me, but he does something worse. With his thumb and forefinger, he slides my eyelids shut, sentencing me to the vulnerability of darkness. So her immediate interpretation of events is that she is back in Capitol custody, which is a logical conclusion given that the first face she sees is Plutarch Heavensbee, someone she associates only with the Capitol. And we don't get that moment of doubt here in the film. Likewise, we also don't see her repeatedly trying to remove herself from the games she believes she's still in. In the book, she wakes up in the hospital, finds the tubes in her arm, and pulls them out and passes out. Then she wakes up, finds herself tied to the table, and she knocks herself out. Then, later when she wakes up, she has a bit more motor control, right? Because she was paralyzed by the lightning strike. When she has more movement to her body, she is able to look around and she sees Beetee, like we see in the film. She wants to make sure that Peeta is not subject to the Capitol's control or torture, so she makes the decision to try to free him from the games herself. Here's what she has in mind. Since I have failed to keep him safe in life, I must find him. Kill him now before the Capitol gets to choose the agonizing means of his death. There are a few syringes sealed in sterile plastic on a table near Beetee's bed. Perfect. All I need is air and a clean shot at one of his veins. I pause for a moment, consider killing Beetee, but if I do, the monitors will start beeping and I will be caught before I get to Peeta. I make a silent promise to return and finish him off if I can. She picks up the syringe, planning to eliminate Peeta. In the film, it looks more like she's picking up the syringe as a weapon in case she needs it for whatever she finds outside. She heads into the hall to go look for Peeta and happens across a cracked door. Then she hears Plutarch and Finnick discussing something. When Plutarch tells Finnick that they can't go rescue Annie, Finnick asks about killing himself, or at least that's what's implied, and Haymitch outright rejects it. As long as you're alive, they'll keep her alive for bait, says Haymitch. It's at that point that Katniss comes into the room, not when they're discussing Peeta. And it seems like she's probably still pretty incapacitated because she describes herself as careening into the room, and Haymitch actually helps steady her. Unsurprisingly, the film presents a stronger, more capable Katniss here. Haymitch notices her syringe when he helps her and says, "So it's you and a syringe against the Capitol. See, this is why no one lets you make the plans." Which is sort of what we see in the film.
You and a syringe against the Capitol. See, this is why no one lets you make the plans.
But in the film, we have this conversation after she has already attacked him. At this point in the books, there's still a tenuous trust between Katniss and Haymitch, and he explains the situation to her. "Katniss, I'm going to explain what happened. I don't want you to ask any questions until I'm through. Do you understand?" In the film, we get a much more abbreviated explanation for the plan to get Katniss out of the arena, which does make sense given that the film has consistently shown a less coordinated rebellion.
Listen, we couldn't tell you with Snow watching. It was too risky.
You have been our mission from the beginning.
The plan was always to get you out.
Half the tributes were in on it. This is the revolution, and you are the Mockingjay. And we're on our way to District 13 right now.
Here's how the plot was explained to Katniss in the book. There was a plan to break us out of the arena from the moment the quell was announced. The victor tributes from 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 11 had varying degrees of knowledge about it. Plutarch Heavensbee has been, for several years, part of an undercover group aiming to overthrow the Capitol. He made sure the wire was among the weapons. BT was in charge of blowing a hole in the force field. The bread we received in the arena was code for the time of the rescue. The district where the bread originated indicated the day, 3, the number of rolls the hour, 24. The hovercraft belongs to District 13. Rightfully, Katniss is overwhelmed by this news, and the fact that she is now a pawn in the Rebels game, just as she had been in the Capitol's games, a theme that we see throughout Mockingjay. When Katniss comments on the fact that she was not informed of the plan, Plutarch says this: "Neither you nor Peeta were told. We couldn't risk it." Haymitch elaborates, "Because once the force field blew, you'd be the first ones they'd try to capture, and the less you knew the better," says Haymitch. Plutarch does explain that she was always the priority because she's the Mockingjay. But when Katniss asks Haymitch about their deal, we hear this: "The others kept Peeta alive because if he died, we knew there'd be no keeping you in an alliance," says Haymitch, "and we couldn't risk leaving you unprotected." Then Haymitch explains that Anabaria, Joanna, and Peeta were collected by the Capitol, and sort of like we see in the film, Katniss attacks Haymitch, but she goes claws out and does harm to his face and eye. The film is coming to a close, so it makes sense that they wouldn't linger on the details of this. While they do abbreviate this scene pretty significantly, they do it in ways that are logical for where they are in this movie. But here's what we miss between when the film shows Katniss being sedated and her waking up to find Gale in her room. After she hears about Peeta, she is restrained and tied to her bed, and she smashes her head into her bed over and over again in rage. Then, when it hurts too much, she wails in a horrible, dying animal way. The film does not show us the depth of her despair at losing Peeta. We see that she's upset, she attacks Haymitch, but not to the same extent that she is actively self-harming the way we see in the book. She spends a while sedated. After that, we see Finnick apologize to her, which is important because at this point, they're actually in quite similar situations. But Katniss throws it in his face. "Katniss, I'm sorry." Finnick's voice comes from the bed next to me and slips into my consciousness. "I wanted to go back for him and Joanna, but I couldn't move. It's better for him than Joanna. They'll figure out he doesn't know anything pretty fast, and they won't kill him if they think they can use him against you," says Finnick. "Like bait?" I say to the ceiling. "Like how they'll use Annie for bait, Finnick?" I can hear him weeping, but I don't care. "I wish she was dead," he says. "I wish they were all dead and we were too. It would be best." Maybe this is too grim for a PG-13 movie, but given that they did a dance remix for The Hanging Tree, I sorta doubt it. Then we get the scene with Gale. And the film is pretty faithful to the book here.
You've just been asleep for a few days.
Are we home? Where's Prince?
She's alive. So's your mother. I got him out in time.
Got them out.
After the games, they sent in hovercrafts, and they started dropping firebombs.
They're not in 12?
There is no District 12. It's all gone.
The most significant difference between the film and the book is that we get Katniss's reaction to hearing the news that there is no District 12. In the film, we see the news transform Katniss's face. Despair, heartbreak, disbelief, fury. Jennifer Lawrence did such a great job here. And that's the end of the film. So let's talk about the film overall. We'll start with characters and then move into larger themes. Snow. Let's start easy. Movie Snow is a pretty different Snow than what we see in the books. He's not subtle. And movie Snow is reactive to nearly everything Katniss does.
As long as it ends with her picture in the sky and the sound of cannon.
Which isn't really consistent with the underhandedness that we see Snow exhibit throughout the series. Specifically in Catching Fire, the underhandedness we should have seen from Snow is basically how he aligned with her publicly, celebrated her engagement and her upcoming wedding, and then let her be sent back into the arena as though it were no fault of his own. The films present a version of events that is much more like Katniss defied the Capitol by getting in the way of the peacekeepers, so we're gonna send her back into the arena.
The broadcast cut out here. before any of the excitement happened. There's a way we can still win.
The male and female tributes are to be reaped from the existing pool of victors.
A lot more transparent, which is easier to understand from a movie perspective, but it simplifies the character a lot. Then we can talk about Snow's relationship with Plutarch. Realistically speaking, Snow is probably not a man with many friends. He's been poisoning people for years. It would probably be pretty difficult to be comfortable getting close to him. Probably pretty uncomfortable not close to him. And in the movie, he's oddly dependent on Plutarch's counsel. Why? Plutarch is the head game maker for the 75th games, not a political counselor. Plutarch didn't seem to hold any specific social position within Snow's council, court, whatever. He wasn't even the first choice for the new head game maker after Seneca Crane's retirement. Plutarch actually indicates that it was hard for them to find a head game maker for the upcoming games. That said, I do understand for the film why presenting Plutarch and Snow as close could be helpful. It allows the audience an inside look into how capital society is run, the ideas that might have encouraged certain pieces to fall into place for the rebellion to have occurred. It just doesn't really reflect the Snow we see in the book. Rather than the careful calculation of book Snow, movie Snow presents a more comfortable picture of authoritarianism. Someone who lashes out directly when their power is challenged. I commented a bit about this in the Hunger Games is a Great Film Adaptation series. The filmmakers, even though there's a different director, they make a similar choice where they present a version of authoritarianism that is comfortable for us as viewers. They present a natural, masculine-looking Snow, when in the text he's described as having undergone cosmetic procedures. That's why Katniss is obsessed with his puffy lips. Similarly, they changed the look of the capital from a candy color city to something much more utilitarian. While I understand why they made these changes, it significantly affects the commentary offered by the series. We're supposed to see a contrast between the capital and District 13 in a way that does not quite land in the films. The contrast between District 13 and the capital was supposed to be stark, super clear, because it's presenting two different forms of control that we should be aware of. Yes, obviously there is high control in District 13 where portions of food are carefully regulated so that you have exactly the calories you need. There is no fun or entertainment, no personal style. You don't even get your own shoes. It's just whatever happens to be around from previous people. That version of control is really obvious. What may be less obvious is the kind of control that we see in the capital, where there is affluence and resource hoarding and endless trend chasing. They're two different flavors of control, but both leave citizens compliant, and we should be wary of both. Katniss, Peeta, and Gale. Movie Katniss and Gale are often positioned as heroes. During the Victory Tour, we see Katniss trying to intervene when the old man is about to be executed, and when the Hob is raided and then burnt down, she goes to help Ripper. These incidents only happen in the film, and they alter who Katniss is as a character. Book Katniss is not always brave. She doesn't always want to fight, and she is not interested in being the hero. And then there's Gale. He is a rebel, but he's not the hero that they're trying to present in the film. He's engaged with rebellious discussions in the mines, but he's not going out of his way to cause trouble without coordination because he's much more aware of what it would actually take for the rebellion to succeed, which makes sense in the bigger picture of his characterization. He's a skilled tactician and strategist. There's no reason for him to have made the choices that we see in the film besides heroics. But we'll get more to that when we get down to the rebellion a little bit later. Then there's Peeta, who has been softened to the point of removing just how capable, compassionate, and cunning he is. Movie Peeta is more naive.
I don't want to be the one that shoots first.
What if they don't either?
And self-interested.
I want Wyrus and Beatty.
Now, who else?
Mags.
Then book Peeta. This is problematic because Peeta's position as a representation of diplomacy should not be presented as weakness. Diplomacy is an important part of conflict and negotiation. So Peeta's skill with words and with people is an essential part of understanding this debate between diplomacy and war that we're supposed to see through the love triangle. Speaking of which, throughout the films, we see them downplay Katniss's relationship to Peeta and emphasize her relationship to Gale in ways that just do not reflect the book. I do understand that this was meant to play into the love triangle trend at the time. Check out the love triangle video if you haven't seen it already. But this series was never supposed to be so focused on Peeta and Gale. Collins was more pushed towards that by her editor and the market in general. These alterations may seem small, but they take away from the consideration of diplomacy and war that we're meant to see through the story, and ultimately take away from Katniss choosing Peeta in the end, because the audience doesn't really get to see who Peeta is and the power that he carries. The allies. As I've mentioned in the last two videos, the films kind of hollow out the relationships between Katniss and the other victors. This is a trend that we'll see continue into Mockingjay. More than that, we lose just how skillful these other people are. We don't see how Finnick, Mags, BT, Wyrus, and Joanna are all smart and careful players in their own right. Of course, we know that they're all dangerous, but we don't see just how aware they are of the games and the political structure that they're a part of, the way we do in the book. Capital people. Similarly, the film minimizes the effect of the Quarter Quell on Capital citizens themselves. We don't show the train attendant showing special care to Peeta and Katniss on the train as they return to the Capital, or the people that are genuinely lamenting them going back in the games. We don't see the prep team sobbing and struggling to contain themselves while they get Katniss ready for her events. Outside of Cinna, Effie, and Caesar in the films, the only time we get an emotional reaction from the Capital people is when the baby bomb is dropped.
This is news. Let's find out more.
This is a concerning change because it doesn't allow for people of privilege to be confronted with injustice and find themselves without the tools to do anything about it. The Capital people have found themselves in a parasocial relationship with the victors. They recognize that the Victor Quell is an injustice, but they don't really know what to do about it, if they can do anything at all. This is an important point of discussion, and one that is largely neglected by the film. District 12. In the film, District 12 is largely presented as supportive of Katniss. In the book, we consistently see the opposite to be true. The moment that Katniss is recognized as an enemy to the Capitol, or at least a target of the Capitol, District 12 mostly turns its back on Katniss, and by extension, Gale and his family. Nobody wants to be involved with activity that could put them on the bad side of the law. So we don't get moments like this where District 12 is openly supporting her. The fact that District 12 does not support Katniss before she's sent into the arena and is still bombed to ash after she's rescued is a quiet lesson to those of us reading. Bowing to those in power does not ensure your security or protection. Accepting, or at least not challenging, oppression does not ensure your safety. And taking on a role like Katniss's, where you're on the right side of history, doesn't really ensure support. In fact, you may face resentment and hatred from peers. Those are both incredibly important lessons to walk away from Catching Fire with. Panem and Knowledge. The film presents a world much more similar to our own, where people seem to be able to access whatever information they need. People have skills that they have no reason to have, like the majority of the victors being able to swim, for example. Other people don't seem to know or exhibit skills that they should have, like Finnick and his weaving. In the book, even people with the most privilege, the people in the Capitol, have an odd relationship to knowledge. Plutarch is extremely well read and knowledgeable, but it seems like a lot of the Capitol people are not. Reading in general isn't a popular pastime in the Capitol. I mean, Effie believes that pearls are made from coal. This is not a very educated group of people, even if they did go to university. In Sunrise on the Reaping, we learned that generally speaking, books, and therefore knowledge, are pretty hard to come by in Panem. The film's choice to not include this whole conversation around the complicated relationship to knowledge that Panem has is a pretty massive oversight, because it eliminates the commentary that Collins provided on the need to preserve access to knowledge. Look at us. We live in the age of the internet. We technically have all of human knowledge, essentially, at our fingertips. But as more and more slop is published and we rely more on AI than being able to vet our own resources, we're allowing our access to knowledge to disintegrate. Now, perhaps even more than when the original trilogy was published, we need to be aware of how important our shared knowledge and inherited knowledge are, and, how important physical media is. And while we're here, I do want to express a concern I have with the upcoming Sunrise on the Reaping movie. With the way that knowledge is taken for granted in the other films, I think that we may get a version of Lenore Dove that is not quite so bookish. That's just one of my thoughts on the film, though. Let me know what you think. The Rebellion. I've talked about this extensively throughout the series, but it bears repeating. The Rebellion is deeply misrepresented by the films. The book makes it clear that the Rebellion, from before the Victory Tour straight on through to the end of Mockingjay, is the result of careful coordination among thousands of people. It's not Katniss's or Peeta's or Gale's heroics that ensure that the rebellion occurs. The desire for rebellion has been simmering under the surface for decades. Katniss does inspire people to take action, but she is not aware to the extent of the rebellion until the final chapter of Catching Fire. At the beginning of Catching Fire, Snow comes to visit Katniss to challenge her to convince the districts that she's in love with Peeta. And as I said at the beginning of the series, I think that has more to do with him wanting to distract her, to keep her from making the situation with the districts any worse than it is about her actually needing to convince anyone of her feelings for Peeta. She got pretty sick on that tour. We see that this is a strategy that Snow uses throughout the history of Panem. When he meets younger Haymitch for the 50th games and tells him that his girlfriend doesn't love him, that it's just like a thing that covey girls do, is trick men into believing that they care about them. That may have also been a distraction from the situation that Haymitch was in. Of course, Haymitch doesn't really fall for Snow's stance that maybe Lenore Dove didn't love him, which good for him, but that might have been a strategy he was employing there. We know that with Finnick and with several of the other victors that he used the threat of harming their loved ones to keep them in line. It is very much part of Snow's character that he subdues people by keeping them focused on the wrong thing. The films also omit the economic effects of the rebellion, the supply chain effects, the reality that much of the capital can't access anything. Seafood, ribbons, whatever they need, they can't actually get a hold of it for a lot of Catching Fire and certainly into Mockingjay. These are not small details to have been erased. Everything from hidden communication networks to the supply chain effects of conflict are important for people to be aware of if they find themselves in a system of oppression. The series makes some pretty significant points about what it takes to overcome systems of violence and oppression. It requires for people to accept the reality that they may lose their own lives and the lives of those they love, that supply chain effects are practically inevitable, and that for all of this to be successful, you need to have networks of hidden communication, a way to connect with people who want to see change happen without it being publicly accessible to anyone that might want to stop that from happening, which is the opposite of what we see in the film. These Mockingjay symbols that people have painted all over the place, that's not how these changes happen. I'm not saying that this is a perfect guide for how to overcome oppression. I'm just saying that reading the series is an opportunity to look at the hard truths of what it takes to see those systems overcome. Another key point of the series is that war is not glorious. You're not a hero for fighting, you're tainted by it. I don't think that the film handled this very well either. It's not surprising given that the film is part of American cinema and so much of American history and politics, I guess, is about glorifying war and fighting. It's important that we recognize that that messaging is tucked into this film, even though it's not included in the books, whether we like it or not. Back to the take. Is Catching Fire a great film adaptation? I'm sorry, but it's a foul from me. It's a good movie, beloved by the fandom for sure. but it doesn't really do a good job of honoring the original text or characters. It reinvents them to make the story more recognizable and appealing to a modern American audience, or at least 2010s modern. We've made it through the second film, yay. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I'm sure we won't all agree, so please feel free to drop whatever you felt was great about the Catching Fire adaptation, what you wish that they had or hadn't changed. I'm curious to see different views on the films. Personally, I've had a lot of trouble negotiating the differences between the films and the books, and saw somewhere along the way someone say that the films are an alternate universe version of the story, and it has helped so much for me to look into how the critique that Collins offered in the book changes for the films, and I think that that is so interesting. But what do I know? I'm just a silly goose. Quackers?